The Philadelphia Eagles were busy during the first week of free agency across the NFL, but there are still some leftovers out there in the open market that just might interest Howie Roseman.
You are Locked On Eagles, your daily Philadelphia Eagles podcast. Part of the Locked On Podcast Network, your team every day.
Welcome on in, Eagles fans. I'm Louie DiBiase, host of the Locked On Eagles podcast. Eagles analyst also over at Bleacher Report. On today's edition of the show, free agent options the Eagles can still pursue. Plus, we discuss if the Eagles have done enough at certain positions of need, and we predict the next big move that Howie Roseman could make. We thank you so much for making Locked On Eagles your first listen each and every day. Today's episode is brought to you by Game Time. Download the Game Time app, create an account, use our code LOCKEDON for $20 off your first purchase. So again, as we mentioned on the show, the last few shows, the Eagles have done plenty in free agency already, taking care of a lot of needs on both sides of the football, but it was only the first week of free agency. The Eagles and all teams constantly are surveying the open market to see how they can improve their roster. Of course, the NFL draft is now where the next big moves are going to come for the majority of these teams, but especially with Howie Roseman, he's always out there trying to improve this team, whether it's through another free agent contract, whether it's through a potential trade, or again, just preparing for the draft. Like, he is gearing up for more splash moves. You see this guy even after the draft in May, June, July, August, right before the season in September, a couple years ago with Chauncey Gardner-Johnson. It is always Howie season. So I still think even after a week where he went out there and got a star running back in Saquon Barkley, an underrated edge rusher in Bryce Huff, the boy, the man, he's back. The safety, Chauncey Gardner-Johnson, Devin White. I mean, the list goes on. He extended Landon Dickerson. He made a lot of moves on both sides of the ball. Still think he can go out there and improve this team if he wanted to. Again, I think the draft is where the focus should be now, but I think there are moves that they could still make. When you look at safety is where I was thinking, because although they did bring Chauncey Gardner-Johnson in, like, that was the big move that they absolutely needed to make. It's the move that me and Gino would not shut up about on this podcast for months. They did make that move, reuniting with Chauncey Gardner-Johnson. And do they need a safety right now? Are they in dire need? I wouldn't say so. Sidney Brown was a third-round pick last year that has all the traits to be a modern-day stud at this position. He flies to the football. He's good in coverage. He's a really good tackler. He's got to control himself a little bit more this year, I think, for sure, compared to last year in the summer and in the regular season. But he is coming off a torn ACL, so that'll probably keep him out for the start of the season. Reed Blankenship is a very, very just solid, steady player. So you have a trio that's young and is pretty productive at the NFL level with a lot of upside, specifically with CGJ and Sidney Brown. Like, that can be your long-term trio. But I will say, again, Sidney Brown is injured. Vic Fangio, he's going to want to run more three safety looks than you're used to with Jonathan Gannon and Sean Desai. It's going to be more like what you saw, honestly, with Matt Patricia at the end of the year, where it was very defensive back heavy. So because they're going to want to run more defensive back looks, because Sidney Brown's not going to start the year, and Reed Blankenship's a good player, but he's not the reason I'm not going to do something. All of those things line up to say, hey, the Eagles could still go out there and sign a safety in free agency. Again, do they need to? No, not necessarily. CGJ, Brown, Blankenship, when they're healthy, that is a much better trio than you had last year, for sure. And I think it has more upside even than 2022, which you had with Gardner-Johnson and Marcus Epps. I think Sidney Brown, you would hope he ends up better than Marcus Epps. Reed Blankenship isn't Epps from 2022. Epps was really good that year, but he's on that same tier. However, again, Blankenship is not a reason I'm not doing something. Brown is injured. So if the Eagles want to go out there and still bring in, let's say, a Justin Simmons, who's on the open market. Yes, he's 31 years old, but that means you don't have to sign him probably to a long-term extension. It could be a 1 or 2 year deal with his former coach in Vic Fangio. You can still do that. You could have to start the year Chauncey Gardner-Johnson, who, by the way, also plays in the slot, so you might want another safety in the backfield if you plan on using CGJ more in the slot compared to how often you used him deep in 2022. Fangio might want to use Chauncey around the formation more. So that might be another reason you want a veteran like Justin Simmons in the backfield. Reed Blankenship, again, that can be your trio. And then when Sidney Brown comes back, then yeah, you make a decision on who that fourth guy is going to be. But you're not going to have to commit 4 long-term contracts to these players where it's going to be a logjam that you just can't afford to add anybody else. Again, you would want it to be, I think to me, long-term, I want Chauncey and Sidney Brown. Like, those are your 2 guys. And then again, Reed Blankenship is a very good third safety, but Justin Simmons is a better football player. So I'm not going to not add Justin Simmons because of Reed Blankenship. So safety is still a position I think they could add some depth. It's not a position I want them to, go out there and trade for a Derwin James, make this huge move, like draft even a Cameron Kitchens in the first round. I don't really want that anymore. They got Chauncey Gardner-Johnson. That was the big move I wanted them to make, but that doesn't preclude them from adding a veteran on a short-term deal like a Justin Simmons who can help replace Sidney Brown to start the year and then be an upgrade over what Reed Blankenship was. Because again, Blankenship is good, but you look at the second half of the year, he was a coverage liability. There aren't, he's not mismatch, or I should say matchup proof. He can be a mismatch at times. He's not the most athletic, long-range speed safety. He has very good instincts, good ball skills. He's a really good tackler, but I think he's a limited talent, and I think he's ideally a third safety. But if Justin Simmons is here, Reed Blankenship should probably be your fourth guy when Sidney Brown is healthy. So safety is still something to keep an eye out for. Maybe even if it's not a Justin Simmons, another depth piece, because they need bodies in that backfield outside of Chauncey and Blankenship. They really don't have any veteran proven players that are healthy until Sidney Brown does come back. Receiver is another position I think they could add to on the offensive side of the ball. Probably the draft is where this will come, but you look at free agency, sure, they added DeVante Parker, who is probably an upgrade over anybody you had last year, wide receiver 3. However, Hunter Renfrow is a free agent right now. If you want that technician slot receiver, you could get him probably for dirt cheap right now. Another name that's a bigger name than Hunter Renfrow, and he's a better player that is not signing anywhere for some reason still, Tyler Boyd. Tyler Boyd is a slot receiver that would be the perfect complement to Devontae Smith, A.J. Brown, Dallas Goedert, and Saquon Barkley. Like, if Tyler Boyd is your 4th or 5th option in this offense, I am so in on that. However, I do still think compared to Hunter Renfrow, Tyler Boyd probably will have better opportunities to get more targets and a bigger role on another offense, still in the open market. And yes, he didn't hit on one of those first week deals like even a Curtis Samuel did or a Hollywood Brown. I still think he's going to get a pretty good role with a different team. You look at the Cincinnati Bengals, if they end up trading away T. Higgins, I would imagine they want Tyler Boyd back to complement Jamar Chase. However, though, if he wants to play for another contending team, Tyler Boyd in the past has been a very good 3rd or 4th option. He's honestly that perfect guy. And the Eagles do still have cap space. Maybe they can make it worth his while. Again, I think the role would be too small, but for the Eagles, maybe not for Tyler Boyd, but for the Eagles, it would make a lot of sense why they would be interested in the player, although the player might not be interested in the team. So I could still see them making moves in free agency, even if it's for depth on the offensive line or a veteran defensive tackle to help with Jordan Davis's development, Jalen Carter, Milton Williams, Marlon Tuipulotu. I could see those moves happening. Howie Roseman is still busy at work. Coming up next right here on the Locked On Eagles podcast. Again, the Eagles did improve a lot of their areas of need during the first week of free agency. How do those areas of need look now across the board? We will go position by position coming up next right here on the Locked On Eagles podcast. Today's episode of the Locked On Eagles podcast is brought to you by Game Time. You shouldn't have to worry when you buy tickets to your next big event. Game Time is the fast and easy way to buy tickets for all the sports, music, comedy, and theater events near you. With killer last-minute deals, all-in prices, views from your seat, and their best price guarantee, Game Time takes the guesswork out of buying tickets. Game Time is the only ticketing app that gives you complete peace of mind with your purchase. You can see the view from your seat before you buy them, so you know exactly what to expect when you arrive. All-in prices show your total up front, so you know you're getting a great deal before you check out. Buy tickets in seconds with just 2 taps. They're obsessed with finding ways to help you save money on tickets. So take the guesswork out of buying tickets with Game Time. Download the app, create an account, use our promo code LOCKEDON for $20 off your first purchase. Again, terms do apply. Create that account, redeem our code LOCKEDON for $20 off. Download Game Time today. Last minute tickets, lowest price guaranteed. We thank you so much for making Locked On Eagles your first listen each and every day. Guys, as you know, Locked On has launched the first ever national sports 24/7 streaming channel, Locked On Sports Today. Baseball fans, mark your calendar for March 20th at 7 p.m. Eastern Time for the best MLB season preview coming exclusively to Locked On Sports Today. Find it on March 20th at 7 p.m. Eastern Time on the Locked On Sports Today 24/7 streaming channel on YouTube or the Free Fire Amazon TV channels app. So we are talking about areas of need for the Eagles right now, a week after free agency, and I think they did a good job taking care of a lot of them for the short term, some of them for the long term. Have they done enough, though, at each position? We're going to go position by position now, right here on LOE. So let's start with offense, and we're going to start at the most important position, quarterback. Have they done enough? I think they've done more than enough, of course, investing in Jalen Hurts. But even at the backup spot, I think they did too much last week when they traded for Kenny Pickett, moving down 22 spots from the 3rd round to the 4th round, giving up 2 7th-rounders. I don't think Kenny Pickett is a very good quarterback, but he does have some clutchness in the 4th quarter, good mobility, solid touch on the ball, maybe in a change of scenery with a better offense. He can relive, or I should say revive that first-round potential, although I don't even think he had first-round potential in 2022. It was a best of a bad situation, but he's a day 1 or day 2 talented kind of quarterback at this level. He's a high-end backup. He showed he's not a starter, but I think he can be a high-end backup. But to give up that kind of asset from the 3rd round to the 4th, moving down 22 spots, for me is significant, and it's far more, and 2 7th-rounders is more than what the Bears got for Justin Fields. It's more than what the Patriots got for Mac Jones. So I think they did more than enough here. They're definitely set. They invested a lot in Kenny Pickett to be QB2, although I don't want him to be the guy. That area of need has definitely been filled with him and Tanner McKee competing in the summer. I said this on the show last week. I think Tanner McKee, if it's a fair competition, is a better quarterback than Kenny Pickett. But yes, they did plenty to address the backup quarterback spot. At running back, I would say the same. They did more than enough, signing Saquon Barkley to a 3-year contract worth $12 million a year. Saquon isn't just some running back. He's not even just Miles Sanders or DeAndre Swift, where you still want to focus on who is that RB2, who's that RB3. Those are guys that are going to lead your backfield, but they're going to lead a committee. They're not going to be the guy getting 80 to 90% of the snaps. With Saquon Barkley, you don't invest that contract to then have him be a part of a LeGarrette Blount, Jay Ajayi, Corey Clement-like rotation. No, Saquon Barkley is going to play the vast majority of snaps, as he should, at this position. Kenneth Gainwell will be that RB2, and to me, a reduced role compared to the last few years when he was RB2 behind Sanders and Swift. Boston Scott is a free agent, so you do need an RB3. Maybe you take a guy still later in the draft, but I think they've, if you go in with Saquon Barkley, Kenneth Gainwell, and if you bring back Boston Scott, or you find another undrafted player, or try to find a diamond in the rough, I think they're looking fine at running back right now with Saquon Barkley as your workhorse. At wide receiver, have they done enough? Again, it's kind of like quarterback, yes and no. They have your pillars, DeVonte Smith and A.J. Brown. They did sign DeVante Parker, who, again, I think is an upgrade at wide receiver 3 compared to what you had last year. But I would still want more at wide receiver 3. I would say for wide receiver entirely, they've done enough. But at wide receiver 3, they need to do more. Like, I want to see a Hunter Renfrow type or a Tyler Boyd or a day 2 selection. Give me a Roman Wilson type, or let's say it's a 4th round pick. Like, give me Luke McCaffrey, right? Or Brendan Rice from USC. I think they still need to try to upgrade wide receiver 3 and not bank on DeVante Parker being that guy. So I think they should still do a little more at the wide receiver 3 spot. Another thing they need to do is add some sort of threat at tight end so you can use a 12 personnel package that people actually respect. Jack Stahl did sign with the New York Giants, so he already was a guy I wanted to upgrade from. Now you don't even have Stahl. You've got Grant Calcaterra, you've got Alberto, some young talent, but to me, whether it's a free agent still, although the pool is pretty barren at this point, if it's a draft pick, they need to find a kid on day 2 or day 3 that can really push and give this team a legitimate 12 personnel package. You don't want to need that package like you did in 2018 and 2019 and even 2020 with Zach Ertz and Dallas Goedert, but you want to have a guy, especially not just for 12 personnel, but Dallas Goedert is an injury-prone tight end. He misses time every year. You should almost bank on that happening again this year. The older he gets, too, that's only going to get worse. They need a pass-catching tight end. So, no, they have not done enough at tight end. They really haven't done anything except for extend Albert O, who they didn't even use virtually at all last season. And then the offensive line, I think Matt Hennessy was a really good pickup. He's a solid guard, center, versatile backup that was supposed to start for the Atlanta Falcons last year before he got injured. He was supposed to be the right guard week 1. So that was a really good pickup. However, you did lose, like you add Matt Hennessy, but you did lose Jack Driscoll and Sua Opeta, who signed with Florida teams this past week. So you do need to replace some of that interior offensive line depth. You could also use a premier tackle backup. Again, I think that will most likely come through the draft, is that, the first or second round, even though I don't want it, one of those picks is going to be an offensive lineman, and I would predict that it's tackle. So I'd say quarterback, you've done enough. Running back, you've done enough. Receiver, you have enough, obviously, but you could do more at wide receiver 3. And then I would say, no, you need more at tight end and the offensive line. For defense, I think they did some really good work with the defensive line. I think they're set at defensive tackle. Like, you've got your top 4 in the rotation. You've got Jalen Carter, Jordan Davis, Milton Williams, Marlon Tuipulotu. Would I like a more experienced veteran in that room, of Linval Joseph or Ndamukong Suh 2022 type of move to help replace the leadership of Fletcher Cox? Of course. But you want these young kids to be those leaders. You want them to take over that room. With that top 4, they should be playing the majority of the snaps. I think they're fine at defensive tackle. At edge, you have a plethora of options now because you signed Bryce Huff. You restructured Josh Sweat's deal on Friday, so he's staying this year. You've got Brandon Graham on an extension, a 1-year deal. You want Nolan Smith to take a big step. Like, that's a pretty solid top 4. And then the elephant in the room, Haason Reddick is still under contract. Could they decide to trade him still? Yes, I think that actually is still likely the case. They moved his bonus to April instead of March, so maybe they have more time to trade him. However, they might decide, let's keep Haason Reddick and have a baller-ass, excuse my language, 5-man rotation on the edge, and then get that 3rd-round comp pick next year. So they are deep right now at edge. I imagine they'll draft somebody too. They've done more than enough at the edge. Right now, they're probably looking to remove somebody from that room so they can have more snaps for a Bryce Huff and a Nolan Smith. So I think they've done enough on the defensive line. I would say on the 2nd and 3rd level, even though Devin White, a lot of people do like this move, I don't think it's enough. Devin White last year was benched in Tampa Bay. He's a former 5th overall pick. He has a ton of talent. I think he could bounce back in this defense. Him and Nakobe Dean, that's a lot of potential. It's a high ceiling, but it's a very low floor. I'm still bullish on the Eagles taking a linebacker early in this draft. So no, I do not think they've done enough at linebacker. Also, it's really only those 2 under contract, and that's it. Like, for special teams' sake as well, they need to bring in more linebackers. And then in the secondary, safety, I think they've done enough, although I'm fine with adding a Justin Simmons type. I think Chauncey Gardner-Johnson, Sidney Brown when healthy, and Reed Blankenship is a really strong trio. At cornerback, no, they have not done enough. They have Darius Slay and James Bradbury still. You lost Avonte Maddox. You have Isaiah Rodgers, but you're going to want to add some slot competition for him. I do not want to bank on James Bradbury this year. You've got Keely Ringo, but you guys know I'm somebody that's saying draft a corner in the 1st round. And if not, trade for J.C. Horn. Trade for a Greg Newsome from Cleveland. Give me another young prime cornerback talent, a Reek Woolen or one of these rookies in this class. No, they have not done enough at corner. All right, guys, coming up next right here on Locked On Eagles, what's the next splash move that the Eagles can make? What's their next Saquon Barkley signing or Bryce Huff, or what's the next big trade that's going to come? Will it be in the draft? Will it be before that? We'll get into that coming up next right here on the Locked On Eagles podcast. Today's episode of Locked On Eagles is also brought to you by Robinhood. Did you know that even if you have a 401k for retirement, you can still have an IRA? Robinhood has the only IRA that gives you a 3% boost on every dollar you contribute when you subscribe to Robinhood Gold. But get this, now through April 30th, Robinhood is even boosting every single dollar you transfer in from other retirement accounts with a 3% match. That's right, no cap on a 3% match. Robinhood Gold gets you the most for your retirement thanks to their IRA with a 3% match. This offer is good through April 30th. Get started at Robinhood.com/boost. Subscription fees do apply. And now for some legal information. Claim is of Q1 2024, validated by Radius Global Market Research. Investing involves risk, including loss. Limitations do apply to IRAs and 401ks. 3% match requires Robinhood Gold for 1 year from the date of first 3% match. Must keep Robinhood for 5 years IRA. The 3% matching on transfers is subject to specific terms and conditions. Robinhood IRA available to U.S. customers in good standing. Robinhood Financial LLC, member SIPC, is a registered broker-dealer. All right, so I feel like it would be greedy to ask the Eagles to do more when it comes to splash moves than they already have this week or next week after bringing in Saquon Barkley. Like, that's as big of a move as you can make. Restructuring Josh Sweat, extending Landon Dickerson, bringing in Bryce Huff, reuniting the team with Chauncey Gardner-Johnson. Like, these are all huge splash moves. Like, these are the sexy headlines from last week, and it's been a lot of fun talking about it on the podcast. So I don't expect that to happen week in and week out until the draft, even for Howie Roseman, who's like kind of the king of splash moves. But there are more big moves coming, like not just, I'm talking about, even I don't think Justin Simmons is a splash move. I guess you could consider it, but, it's not a huge trade. It's not a Saquon Barkley level signing. Like Tyler Boyd wouldn't be that either. So what's the next big splash move? Is it going to come from the draft? I think the next ones you could expect are 3 potential moves that'll really grab headlines for the Eagles. And they all could actually kind of link together a little bit. So number 1 is trading Haason Reddick. Number 2 and 3 kind of go hand in hand. It's about the cornerback position. I think, so again, 3 splash moves they can make: trade Haason Reddick, and then either or trading for a prime cornerback talent that's either young and ascending that a team wants out of because of one reason or another, or trading up in the NFL draft for a top cornerback prospect. Those are the 3 splash moves that I'm expecting next. So Haason Reddick, again, the Eagles today did move his roster bonus that's due. It's about almost $2 million. They moved that from the deadline in March to April, so it buys them a little more time potentially to find a trade partner. I think the Haason Reddick move could come. I still would predict that a trade is likely, although I want to keep Haason Reddick. I would still extend him over Josh Sweat, who you restructured, but you didn't extend, so you could still choose to keep Haason. I think the writing's on the wall that you signed Bryce Huff to a 3-year deal. You did restructure Josh Sweat, which likely hints at him staying in 2024. There are rumors you could cut him or trade him. The restructure, with the guaranteed money now of $10 million tells me they want him in-house this year and see if he can bounce back from last year and then commit to the 26-year-old instead of the 30-year-old. So that all tells me Haason Reddick, and not to mention they love Nolan Smith, and they did extend Brandon Graham. That shows me that Haason Reddick could be on the outs. So I think that's the move to expect next. Maybe it goes hand in hand with the cornerback move. Maybe you trade Haason Reddick back to the Carolina Panthers and you get J.C. Horn back. Or maybe it goes hand in hand with improving a linebacker. Maybe you give Jonathan Gannon Haason Reddick back. You trade him to his former team, the Arizona Cardinals, for a draft pick, let's say a 3rd rounder, and linebacker Zaven Collins. I think that's a possibility. That's the next splash move I could see that comes before the draft, is trading Haason Reddick. But again, it's not a guarantee that he's moved. They could decide, we'd rather have a 3rd-round comp pick next year when he signs with another team in free agency. If it's not us, we would rather get that 3rd-round comp pick and have a year of Haason Reddick with Josh Sweat, with Bryce Huff, with Nolan Smith, and with Brandon Graham versus just getting a 3rd right now. Maybe if a team threw in a Zaven Collins or a J.C. Horn, or the Cleveland Browns said, we'll throw in Greg Newsome or Jeremiah Owusu-Koramoah, give us Haason Reddick, like that kind of move, then they would be definitely more prone to trade him now. But I don't think it's guaranteed that they don't say, hey, we have an opportunity to have the best 5-man rotation in the NFL on the edge, and we could still get a 3rd-round comp pick back if Reddick leaves the following offseason. But I do think that would be the next splash move to happen before the draft. If not that, it would be going for a cornerback, maybe an Asante Samuel Jr., although I don't know why the Chargers would trade him, but you never know. Like that kind of move, that kind of trade would be the next splash move for me. And then it would probably be, if the cornerback trade doesn't happen, I think that's what happens in the draft, is the Eagles say, yes, like we still want to take a tackle this year. You know, we believe in our blueprint, our core beliefs in the NFL draft is to start with the trenches, but we got to take a year, especially with James Bradbury's age, Darius Slay's age, Keely Ringo, the unknown of his development still. We need to take a year and be aggressive at this position and get a long-term staple at a very important position that Howie Roseman does prioritize and does value. This time he needs to try it in a different way. Trade up for a cornerback prospect. Go up and get Quinyon Mitchell. Go up and get Terrion Arnold if he falls because of his combine 40-yard dash. Or go up there and get a Nate Wiggins from Clemson if you say we can overlook the weight because he's an elite 4.2 speed cover man that can develop as a tackler and run stopper. Maybe that's the thing, or we can trade up a little bit for, if you like Kool-Aid McKinstry. He's not my favorite type of corner in this draft, or a Cooper DeJean. Regardless of, pick your poison with which prospect. That's another splash move I think is coming, is being aggressive for a cornerback, trading for a prime player or trading up in the NFL draft. So again, those are the three whoa moves that could come next. Trading Haason Reddick away, trading for a cornerback, or trading up in the draft for a cornerback prospect. That's going to do it for today's edition of Locked On Eagles. Let me know what you think is the next Eagles splash move. Hit us up on Twitter at Locked On Birds and at DiBiase LOE. As always, thank you so much for making Locked On Eagles your first listen each and every day. We'll see you tomorrow. Until then, thank you so much for downloading, watching, and listening. And let's go Birds. Fly, Eagles, fly.